time, one of the things that I do think was very groundbreaking about what she was doing at the time was, I believe she was one of the first people, one of the first black people, anyways, to publicly and coherently put forth a biological reasoning behind
Yeah.
white supremacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think lately, not lately, but in the later years of her life, when she wasn't speaking out or she wasn't as popular, people started to convert that biological theory into a cultural theory. And that's where it starts to not fit, because it's not a cultural theory. It's looking at the biology of the situation, the genetics of the situation, the epigenetic expression, is looking at those things. And so those are the things that, even as I was listening to it, I had to keep in my mind, is that she's not talking about cultural issues. She's talking purely from the
The
biological
survival
standpoint.
standpoint. Yeah,
Right.
straight survival. Like just go straight to the raw survival of the fittest. I mean, because you got to think about mentalities of people that came out of caves, and I mean, like she said, a scarce mentality of a mentality of um, we have to fight every day for everything, and we can't let you take nothing from us. We have to take everything from you.
Right. Right. And that's one thing that links her with Dr. Joy DeGrew's PTSS,
Mm-hmm.
because she talks about a little bit about the biological standpoint and how it may have the environmental standpoint and how it may have shaped the culture from the standpoint of, like you said, they come out of the caves, or they live in an environment where scarcity is the law. There's just not enough. There's not a lot. So you begin to be very aggressive and violent and hostile towards anybody that comes in space that could potentially take something from you,
Yeah, yeah.
because this is a life or death situation. Whereas people from other climates, more social people, black people, Native Americans, even the Asians, to an extent, come from an environment where there's an abundance. We don't have that same mentality. So we're more likely to share what we have. We're more likely to be pleasant to
Yeah, yeah.
outsiders.
We welcome everybody in,
Right.
and because it's just like the what's the post Dominique shared in the chat with the African children calling themselves derogatory names in Chinese,
Mm-hmm.
and the first thing I thought was we're too friendly. We keep letting people in. We keep allowing people to have access to our women and children, and women, especially our women, because our women are going to pass this on to the children. We are too accessible. We're too friendly to people. Like Dr. Clark said, you want a friend? Damn it, look in the mirror.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and so one of the things is white genetic annihilation. I think that drives, on a biological level, that drives all group dynamic behaviors, interactions. Because you
Mm-hmm.
hear black people saying the same thing about wanting to maintain our position of dominance genetically and wanting to maintain some sense of physicality. Um, so I think there's that, but I also think, like, that's where I add on to it the cultural piece, which I know she isn't talking about that, but there are quite a few white people that are racist, that are not on the extreme genetic purity tip of the Nazis and the alt-right, but are just on some, I just need my culture to survive.
Yeah, yeah,
I don't
yeah.
care about genetic purity. Black people have some features I like. I like big asses, big tits. I like golden brown skin. And just like they can breed us out, if a black person keeps breeding with white people for eventually the
It
opposite
happens,
happens as well.
and it can,
So
yeah. But also, I'm glad you said that because there was something I was thinking about earlier as I was driving through the city. That yes, and black people do have the greatest amount of melanin, so we could pose the greatest threat. But not just black people, but any melanated people, black, Asians, Hispanic, Latino, any melanated people. If the melanated people mate with the white people long enough, the white people gonna be bred out. especially if the melanated people keep breeding like that. And it can go with all these different groups, but it can go some of the other way around. And of course, it'd probably be easier with the Asian, with lighter, with fairer skin tones and things. But over time, man, things can happen. Over time, things can happen. But also coupling this with abortion rates as well in the Black community. Like the black community probably would be. We probably would either be on par with the Hispanic, probably past them, or even on par with white people if we didn't have so many abortions in our community. So,
yeah, our population would definitely be drastically higher if we didn't have abortions, but that opens up the conversation about what would our overall state of community be.
Well, we know it'd be the same because we ain't got no real leadership. And I keep going places and people keep trying to argue with me that leadership isn't needed. Okay.
Yeah, I hear that a lot too.
Yeah. But let's continue.
That if my definition is understood, that racism, white supremacy is the fear on the part of people who classify themselves as white about white genetic annihilation and the concern for white genetic survival. This would therefore mean logically and specifically that the focus has to be on black males, because black people have the greatest genetic potential to produce the black pigment melanin, which gives off skin color. And since we have the highest level of genetically determined ability to produce this pigment that can cause white genetic annihilation, and it's only males who can impose sexual intercourse. And so the focus consciously, subconsciously has to zero in on the males. This is why I say that understanding, I'm not talking about institutional racism, I'm talking about a total system construct that develops out of certain patterns of thinking on the part of people who classify themselves as white relative to specific realities that exist on this planet. And so then once that is understood, that the fear of genetic annihilation, that takes to the focus on the male, the black male person, as being the number one perceived threat, the number one enemy, and everything flows from that.
I've always thought black masculinity has been under attack. That's just me personally. But knowing, just understanding how warfare, battle, and the tactics people use to impose themselves on other people. If you have to dismantle or disable the males and get the males out the way to have access to the women and children. So the black men are going to be a target because they're the protectors and they're the as you could say, the person who's the instigator in sex, or the person who's initiating sex, rather. So I do know you have to get the man out the way to get to the women and children. Once, like you said earlier, once you get to the women and children, you can impose whatever type of ideas and things. Yes, you're gonna get fight. You're gonna get some resistance, but you're gonna get a little less resistance, especially if they've seen their men be decimated. So think about what we see on a regular basis from a lot of black men. There's some good black men, some real black men out there. Shout out to all of them. But you know, a lot of the images and things that we've been fed over the years throughout our life about black men has been negative. The docile, black man lazy, black men stupid, black men can't do this, black men can't do that, black men in second class, black man is negative. And then, but coupling that with what she's saying about the genetic need to survive, but also understanding that this group of people that we enslaved and these people who are behind enemy lines have the greatest potential to breed us out.
So on one hand, I get it in terms of, because I was just reading a study earlier this week talking about how violence towards members of an outgroup actually elicits a response in the reward circuitry of the brain. So to simplify that for people, your brain responds favorably to you attacking somebody that's not a part of your group. And so that alone explains a lot, just that by itself. But on the other end, I agree with what you said in terms of you have to get the men out of the way because of the way confrontations and wars and conflicts between groups are typically fought. It's typically a physical activity, a physical interaction where men are clashing against each other. And women, while they can participate in that activity and they have been successful, generally speaking, an army of men and an army of women, the army of men is going to win, generally speaking, barring technological advances and stuff like that. So that's where I say I agree with what you're saying from the protector standpoint. And that's also where I kind of waver a bit from her stance on it's purely about the males being able to force sex on the women. So we have to remove them from the equation because black men could essentially rape white women if they wanted to. That's not what she said, but it's kind of paraphrasing of her saying men can impose sex.
Right.
And we know in today's day and age, women can impose sex as well. But that's I think that's modern.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, but in a larger sense, the imposition of sex is mainly going to come from the male. But women can impose sex. But white women can impose sex on us in this system and where we at now.
Right. That's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at. And also from the standpoint of it would also take off the table, not take off the table, but make the conversation more difficult to have on other means and other uses for sexual warfare involving white women engaging with black men, such as the case which would be if a white woman finds herself in a marriage or a sexual relationship with a black man that has a lot of resources, knowing that black man is probably going to die before her. Those resources are going to get transferred to her and her community through that relationship. So I think that's again where you run into this area where she's talking purely about the biological imperative, but there's also this cultural piece that we need to grapple with on the other end that creates different possibilities than those that are purely presented from the biological standpoint. Does that make sense?
But yeah, it does. But I think that's beauty. That's the beauty in what we're doing in these videos that we're going to make. This is going to be the first of a series of a whole bunch of, but us breaking down these videos, because one of the main things like we talked about is looking at this information, analyzing this information, and thinking, how is this relevant to us today? Like in 2022, where we are right now, in June of 2022, how can we use Dr. Welsing's message to help us today? And not just because we got to get past the point where we're just listening to these people and admiring. Yes, Dr. Welsing, Dr. Amos Wilson, all on live. We know, but how can we use the information to make our individual and collective lives better? And if we're not thinking in that pathway, then we wasting their time.